everyone, and welcome to the Trainers Forum presented by HRD Specialized Canine Training. Our guest trainer this evening is Mr. William Dotson. Most of us know him as Bill. He's coming to us from Virginia. And Mr. Dodson has been involved with dog training since 1971, beginning with AKC Obedience and then Schutzen, and then helped found and was later the training director for the California Rescue Dog Association. From there, he has earned mission ready status with Switzerland or with the Swiss Disaster Dog Association, and assisted the Davis, California Police Department as a volunteer canine team from 78 to 80, and then moved to Virginia. There he became involved with Dogs East from 1982 to 1997. With that, Bill has responded to a very long list of national and international disasters, and we are grateful for him coming on this evening. So, Mr. Dodson, thank you for being here.
It's my pleasure.
Tonight, your presentation is on applying metrics to HRD dog training.
Okie doke, and you want me to go ahead and get started?
Yes, sir.
Okie doke. This sounds maybe like an esoteric subject to be talking to dog trainers about, but first let me give you a little bit more of my history. I spent 10 years in research at University of California veterinary school, and then 16 years at a major pharmaceutical company in quality operations. So I'm hopefully pretty well versed in quality operations, quality control, etc. So that's the subject we picked, and let's see if I can run you through a little bit of it. I don't want to bombard you with a huge 2-hour presentation, so I'm going to give you an example of what I'm trying to talk about. Next slide.
Okay.
So it's sometimes what we think we know that keeps us from learning. And what that means is that we think we see something, but we're not really sure. And if we don't track it, then we really don't know. And just an illustration, a good friend of mine is a dog trainer. This was before the epidemic. We were walking down the street at home here, and as we were starting to cross the street, we noticed on the other corner there was a guide dog, blind fellow, and a guide dog with him. And as we walked closer, we noticed the dog lift its leg and pee on the handler's leg. And as we got closer, we noticed that, hey, the guy was reaching in his pocket and looking for a cookie. And as we got to him, the guy fed the dog the cookie. And we said, hey, my buddy, the dog trainer, said, hey, buddy, what's going on? Don't you know that your dog peed on your leg? And the guy said, yeah, I just want to find his head so I can kick him in the ass. So the lesson there is sometimes we don't know exactly what it is that's going on. And the only way we can really do it, next slide, is we have to set up a system of measurements. Now, I'm not talking about a complex system, but we have to be able to put numbers to things so that we know what we're doing, and so you can't improve what you can't measure. Next. So, according to a very famous quality operations gentleman, measurement is the first step that leads to control and eventually to improvement. So we're talking about improving here, how do we know when we're improving? Sometimes you think that you know, but you don't. And if you don't measure something, you don't really understand it. Now, that may seem like, wait a minute, I know what I'm looking at when I see my dog. But if you don't have an objective measurement of that process, then you maybe don't know exactly what your dog is going to do. Next slide, or next. And if you can't understand it, you can't control it. And if you can't control it, you can't improve it. These are time-worn tenets of quality operation. And excuse me, if you do this, then you can have a measure of where you're going. Next slide.
Okay.
So what do we need to do? We need to define a behavior. Now, I have a complete sheet that I use to basically grade the performance of a dog and a handler on a performance. And we have teams out that have been using it and really enjoy using it because it helps them understand exactly where they're going with their training. You have to develop a numeric scale of some sort. Now, you could do this on your own. I'm going to show you an example. Once you measure it, you have to analyze it, you adjust your training plan to meet that, and then apply the new training plan. Next slide.
Okay.
Okay. And this is I stole this somewhere on the interweb. You go through the plan, do, check, act, and what we're trying to do is to keep continuous improvement. We want to improve our performance, the dog's performance, our performance, etc., so that next month or next year we're better than we were before. So, and when I say standards here, the context of HRD training, standard means perfecting any given behavior. Next slide.
Okay.
So here are the goals of using metrics. Next.
Okay.
It identifies and tracks improvement. How do you know you're improving? If you say, well, my dog did pretty good, but if you don't have a number to it that helps you understand that, yeah, I'm slowly getting better, then how do you know you're really, truly improving? Next.
Yeah.
Okay. It also detects behavioral degradation. Behaviors are perishable if not maintained. This is a good place to detect when a certain part of behavior is degrading. Next.
Okay.
And it provides, of course, a pathway for improvement because we all want to be, the best out there. So how do we know when we get there? Next slide.
Okay.
All right. And for our purposes tonight, we will use the example of the train final response. I figured that was a fairly straightforward example of what I'm talking about. I have to apologize. With all the slowdown of the bandwidth, I tried to send a simple little video, but it just wouldn't go. So I have to explain this without the video. What I do, and you could do any kind of breakdown, but I break down the train final response to 6 levels of performance. 0, and I'll explain that in a minute. I use a scale of 0 to 10. I like to have a scale that's pretty broad so I can see small changes. And a broad scale allows us to observe those smaller but important changes. Next slide.
Okay.
Okay, first thing you have to do is define a train final response. And I know Big Dog and now ASD and everybody's trying to, have a glossary, but for our purposes tonight, let's just agree that this is what it is. It's an unassisted, spontaneously performed trained behavior that signifies a positive location of the target odor. And I believe this behavior must be apparent to the handler and trained observers. So first we have to define what we're talking about. And I just defined what I feel is the top, what it should be at the end. Next slide.
Okay.
Okay, just an example here, to take it, I have a sheet I used, and I actually developed it after teaching down at FACS because there were 20, 25 dog teams, and I got tired of doing my hieroglyphics and shorthand, and my handwriting is not the best stuff in the world. So I made up this sheet, and Craig Schultz, I got to give him credit. He and I bounced back and forth with this kind of grading thing, and this is where I've ended up. So if we take the skill of the train final response, 0 means there's no train final response. 1 to 2 means very slow, incomplete, or prompted train final response, and or leaves odor. A 3 to 4 is a slow, indecisive train final response, looks at the handler for direction, and just may leave odor. 5 to 6 defines it's a definite TFR, but may be somewhat slow, may slightly leave odor, but come back to it. 7 to 8 is confident, spontaneous TFR, responds quickly to odor source, may glance at handler. And for me, perfection is the 9 to 10. By the way, I'm one of those people that never gives a 10, so 9's probably at the top of my scale. I'm always waiting for that one that's just going to knock my socks off. But they're very confident, quick, spontaneous train final response, does not look at the handler, stays at the odor, etc. For me, a 4 or less is unsatisfactory. 4 operational status. Now, for training, I want to use this scale to say, okay, that's where I am today. And if I'm a 1-2 today, my goal is going to be a 3-4 the next training or 2. And when I get to 3 to 4, I want to go to 5, 6, etc. I'm always working to improve the dog's performance. Next slide.
Okay.
So what this does is, in a kind of a generic little scale here, is if you plot it out, and some of us nerds will plot things like this. That Greg Schultz and I used to joke it with each other because we're both training nerds. If you plot it out, you can actually see the improvement. You can see a degradation by a little dip. You can see plateaus in your training, but you're always trying to go to that end point where, all right, this is where I want to be. This is where I got to be. I got a 9 or 8 or a 9 in my TFR. Life is good. My dog's finding. That's what I'm looking for. So you can, if you're into that, you can plot it, put it on an Excel spreadsheet, and plot it. The sheet I use to grade has 12 different separate behaviors in a dog merely, and I say merely, a dog locating a source. And we're talking HR here, so we'll stay with that. I've broken it down to 12 separate sets of behaviors or performances, not just one. It's 12. And I don't want to really get into all of those tonight because it's just too time consuming. But if you break it down, you can see those. And I got to admit, I've stolen, traded, and discussed and argued with some of the best detection trainers in the country and the world, actually, and we've come up with this kind of scale. I'm not the only one that uses this sort of system. Next slide. Oh, that's it.
Yep.
Okay. I know that's a quick run through, and I know it's just one little piece. And it's not a complex subject. It's a pretty straightforward subject. One of the things I was taught very early on by a gentleman named Glenn Johnson was systems analysis. Break everything down to its simplest parts, analyze them, figure out how you're going to do it, and then go do it. And as I said, I break it down to 12. We have a couple teams that are using this sheet and find it extremely beneficial, whether it's a brand new dog or it's an experienced dog. They've used it successfully. You use it at every training so that they can plot the way their dog is performing. I also am not talking about it, but I also have a handler worksheet that does the same thing. And again, there's 12 different things I'm looking at in how the handler does this. I think we sometimes tend to forget about the handler, but the handler is an extremely important part of this process. And I think sometimes we need to, sometimes I think we need to analyze what the handler is doing and how they need to fix it. And I was blessed by a invitation to go to the Netherlands last month and work with Dick Stahl, and that was an eye opener. I mean, a huge eye opener. And he does it because he's so experienced and does it every day as a profession. He does this in his head. He just, everything the dog does, he analyzes and immediately gives feedback to the handler, and it's wonderful. I mean, getting that kind of feedback is, I think, very, very important. One of the things I think we really have to consider as a dog handler trainer is being honest with ourselves, that we're doing what we need to. And so let's go with the questions if you have any. If I haven't blown you, if you're wondering what the hell I'm talking about, let's get that cleared up.
Good deal. And thank you for presenting on this. I know I've used a broken down schedule like this. Instead of the 0 to 10, I use a 0 to 4 system. So I think we've got some of the same divisions going on. And we do have some steps or some questions for you. The first one is, where can they learn more about these 12 steps and so forth?
Yeah, it sounds like AA, right? 12-step process. I'm willing to share the score sheet. If someone sends me an email requesting, I call it a score sheet. Now, some people bridle at that type of term because, hey, we're working dogs. We're not competition dogs. But I don't know what else to call it, so I call it a score sheet. And I've also developed a definition and how I look at each one. If they will send me an email, and I may pay for this, but do it anyhow. Send me an email at sarbill@aol.com. That's Sam Adam Robert Boy India Lima at AOL.com, and just request the score sheet, and I'll send you a copy electronically.
Very good. I know there's a lot of people that'll appreciate that. We've got another question. I understand train final response, but do you think a dog can lose interest in the hunt range if there's too many sources placed in a small area?
Well, some people may not like it, but I once worked with back in the early 2000s.
I think we lost you there, Bill. Okay, we have temporarily lost the connection with Bill. Let me see if I can get him back on the phone.
I'm not sure what happened there. I have a video. Well, I have a bunch of videos from the Netherlands, but um, she operates. The police officer operates with what they call a crime scene dog. Here we probably call it an article dog, but it's more complicated than that. There, where she searches a crime scene, basically a relatively small area for anything with human scent on it. Now, Dick Stahl is an evil sucker, and what she had to search for was tiny nuts. I don't know if anybody knows what about I don't know, a 4 millimeter nut would look like, but it's tiny, little acorn nuts. They're metal that has human scent on it, and it was pushed into the ground to find that scent. And the key is the dogs were working. The dog worked, and this was a brand new dog for her. She'd only had it 4 days. The dog, trained by Dick Stahl, but the dog worked without distraction, without totally focused on the job. Now, I think maybe once or twice it did lift its head, and one can say, well, maybe it's just taking a break, but the lift was only a second or two. The video of the trained final response I wanted to put out there was a little Cocker Spaniel that was an absolute maniac searcher. I mean, a maniac. And the TFR is what, remember I said define. Define what to you is a TFR. Don't really care. As long as it's readable, as long as it's reliable, and as long as it's trained, of course. And this little dog, being a sporting dog, on the scent would literally go almost catatonic, lock up tight, and stare at the odor. But the handler had decided, wanted to have it sit. And the trainer and I are going, what the hell's wrong with this damn guy? You know, he's got a trained final response from heaven, and he's trying to put something into the dog that really is not beneficial. So you have to define what your TFR is. And I said with the measurement, is it reliable? Is it always there? Does it work? Distractibility, that's a whole other piece of the score sheet. But will the dog, you know, what does it do? How does it do it? I mean, a blind person could have read this dog's trained final response. It really was that much. But also, for one brief second, it took its head and moved about 6 or 7 inches from the source and then back to it. Now, I got to tell you, the source was a data storage device, which has an extremely low scent pattern or odor pattern. So I don't know why he did it, you know, but it really didn't affect what he did. You know, I'd still give that one a good solid 8, you know, understanding that I may work. This may be a handler issue where the handler's got to respond a little quicker, trust his dog a little bit better. But anyhow, that's kind of what I'm talking about. You have to become a team. I have a good friend who's in charge of 9 cargo screening teams around the East Coast in airports. His biggest issue is not the dogs and not the training, it's the handlers. So, I mean, take that for whatever it's worth to you. So, anyhow, any other questions?
I think that's a great point you just made, that a lot of times our issues are more lying with the handler versus the dog and getting the handler on the right page. Another question that comes to us kind of in the same light, in regards to protocol dogs who stare at you as a response versus trained final response, how would you scale differ in regards to metrics? Is there a separate score sheet?
Well, okay. When you say stare at you, the handler?
That's how it was submitted. So
Okay. Okay. Well, that I once heard talk. It was in a canine thing. Talk by a lawyer, and the answer to that, and the answer to most any question, is the word depends.
mm-hmm.
And it has to be something that you observe. If, in my opinion, this is just my opinion, and this comes from customs, this comes from my buddy in the cargo screening, it comes from people that do this for a living every day. If the dog looks at me before it starts the trained final response, I am highly concerned about handler cueing. Now, having said that, if the dog is starting an action such as a down or a sit and then looks at the handler, that usually tells me, well, they're just waiting for the toy. So it depends on the situation at the time, and there's no one right answer. I would still score that down, a solid 7 or so, just to say, yeah, I did it. But the problem comes in with the possibility of creating false positive indications, particularly if the handler encouraged the dog, like, what do you got? Or show me. When the dog gets interested in, say, a dead animal or something. And when you're on a real search, you're under stress. And if your dog starts showing interest somewhere, you're gonna wonder, is it or isn't it? And if you have talked to your dog or you've done things that have created this cueing, then you might end up with a false positive, meaning there's nothing there, but the dog said, "Oh, okay, I just read what Mom said, and so I'm going to do this." They're not lying to you because, in my opinion, dogs can't lie. They're just telling you how they're trained, and they're telling you what they did. So that's the answer I've got, and I kind of stick with it. I'm real bare on cueing. I've seen way too much of it, and I think one has to think about it considerably. I wish I could show people these videos from Holland. You'd understand what I'm talking about. I can't do it because they're too large. The videos are too large. It makes a difference. What it really means is two things. One, if the dog not necessarily stares, but they put their nose down towards the source or on the source almost, and they perform their trained final response, and then some dogs will turn, or some dogs turn as they're downing. If it's reliable, yeah, okay, accept it. But is that, and that's something you have to determine as a trainer. Is that acceptable or not? And as I said, one of the things I worry most about is creating the false positives, and because they're dangerous and they create problems, particularly if you're doing HR forensics. And the police officer comes out with all their shovels and everything and starts digging, and they don't find anything. They start questioning their dog. So it's a problem. It's up to the hand. I mean, we're all up to the handler, and I'm hoping against hope that all the efforts that coming through NIST and ASD are going to clearly define some of these things. That people, when they write the standard, I don't want the standards driving ASD or NIST. I want NIST or ASD driving the standards. If that makes any sense. Yeah. And so I think that's a viewpoint at least I have. And I'm an old farm boy, and I had to suffer through basically interrogations in the pharmaceutical company by FDA agents. And understand they're the only police force in the country, one, that doesn't wear guns, but they also never have to have a search warrant, and they have the authority to close a plant, a pharmaceutical plant, without any other legal justification. They can do it personally. So, that's pretty serious stuff. And I just wanted you to know that's where I come from. I understand that, and it's why I'm pretty serious about this, quality thing, because it really does make a difference. Are you going to be 100%? Nobody's 100%, but I sure as hell want to be up in the high 90s, and that's kind of where I'm coming from.
Well, I think one of the things, I think we both agree on this. It starts in part with the handler having clearly defined expectations of what it is they're expecting their dog to do, and then
exactly. And the problem with that expectation is it clearly what it needs to be? Okay, we can want a dog to do X, Y, or Z, but does it meet the needs of the performance of what that dog is expected to do? If that's a little bit gobbled, but and that's why you go to trainings. That's why you start understanding. And the dogs you need to be watching are the ones that are really, really good, and keep that in mind. It's now the dog just died. She worked under me in a seminar in Colorado. That dog is to this day my mental image of a super, super working HRD dog. And that's my goal. That's the one I work for. Always know the best. Don't go with what's just okay or accepted or whatever. At least I don't. And I think it's always better to aspire to getting a little better, a little better, a little better. And of course, you get to a point, you get to diminishing returns, and then you have a decision to make. And that is continue with that dog, or continue with that trainer, or how you're going to work it. So there's always questions about where you're doing, what you're doing, and why you're doing it.
Very much so. We've got another question here. What is the best way to jazz up the train final response? My dog will find the HR, but not sit right away. She knows it. She is young, but I want to make sure I'm doing it right to get her excited about it and commit to it.
Yeah, I mean, here's the problem. I'm consulting literally as we speak. I mean, I haven't gotten a message from them in like an hour. I'm consulting with a team down in Argentina about their HRD dogs, and until I get a lot more data from them, I can't say what I think it is. I have a notion right now, but I can't say, okay, this is what you need to do. So I do exercises with I call them speed drills. They're a little bit different. If anybody's been around Craig Schultz, my speed drill and his is a little bit different. But I'll maybe put 2 or 3 sources out in a line just out in the front yard. And this is where I think a lot of people kind of miss the boat a little bit. Work your dog on a line, a light line. Get some paracord, maybe 15 feet of paracord, a really light little catch, and you can sometimes coax your dog into that sit and immediately reward them. And then always understand what it is you're trying to have the dog understand at that moment. What is the purpose? What is the plan? And I don't know, somebody probably is going to do a planning talk on your series, but you always have to plan every single training session, and then you have to plan every separate repetition. So, and you don't want the energy to have to come from the handler. The energy must be some people call it the value of the source. In other words, make that source the most valuable thing in the world. You're just a dope on a rope. You want that source to be the important thing to do. And sometimes, no matter how long you've been training the dog, I still go back to what we call motivational exercises. So the dog stays motivated. It likes to do it. It wants to do it. So when she asked about, well, my dog knows it and finds it, but it's something personally I would have to actually see to say, okay, here's what I do. Here's what you can do with it. There's no generic. There never has been and never will be a generic training plan for any dog, in my opinion. Okay, and so we have to respond to each dog as they present themselves to us. And like somebody's probably said 100 times, you train the dog in front of you. But you have to understand that dog and what turns it on, what makes it go, what makes it perform. And it may mean, if anybody knows Don Blair talks about repetitions in the hundreds. The U.S. Customs dogs maintenance routine mandated in their manual is 40% of their training is motivational exercises. 40%. 20% is working on nothing but the train final response. So already we up to 60% doesn't have anything to do really with searches. We need to get those basics in. And so that's kind of my answer there. If she gets anything or he gets anything out of that, I hope. And again, you got my email. Send me another email question a little bit about and tell me, exactly what the dog is doing, how it acts, etc.
Very good. Another question is, if your dog is doing his thing and is struggling, how long should you allow him to work unassisted? I've had my boy circle the same area in and out for 15 to 20 minutes. Is there a point that I should be concerned that he will become frustrated enough to shut down?
And the answer there probably is yes, yes, he will get frustrated. But it's not his fault. And here's there's kind of the one comment I'd have on that. There is probably a few steps missing in the foundation training, and if you haven't got the dog excited about that odor ought to be the thing they want more than anything else. I had a dog once that would leave food for cadaver. Nothing mattered to her except the cadaver odor. That's what I want. I want the dog. That's the attitude. There's so much value because of what it's going to get out of that, the paycheck, that they're not going to do that. In fact, what they're learning is depending on how you look at it, they're just dinking around because they can. They can. And for me, there's not enough value in that odor form to really go to it. Do they smell it? Sure they do. I once did a seminar, and all the dogs were missing this training odor I brought with me. And I knew it smelled because I put it out there. It smelled, it stank. And so I just took I had a 4-month-old Mal puppy, and I took her for a walk, and she hit it like a ton of bricks, because that's what she was selected for. And all I would have to do with that dog is to build on that, to let her know, yes, it absolutely is the best thing in the world. And sometimes I have to sacrifice something for a while, like the TFR, to get that enthusiasm. If I'm asking my dog always to go in and do that perfect, beautiful TFR, I may be cutting the enthusiasm of the dog. And so there are times when I say to people, okay, as soon as the dog puts its nose down to the odor, reward it immediately. Have a ball. Just, down, have a good time, and then do it again, and then do it again, and then do it again, until the dog says, "Oh, it's that stinky stuff that they really want, and I get a paycheck for that. That's what I need to do." So, I mean, that's the best I can answer with that.
Well, they followed up with, he's excited and working. It seems he's circling in an attempt to find it. There are problems that I've set up to be hard and are very small sources.
Yeah, and I guess my comment, because it's kind of fun when everybody's anonymous and they don't see me, so, welcome to the internet world. But in the bottom line is, why doesn't he find it? And one, was it too hard for the dog? Is it not? Is it something they can't do? And I would say to people, if you go on Facebook and friend Bridget Verster, good friend of mine in the Netherlands, she just posted a video of a 4-month-old puppy hunting for a Kong hanging in a tree in a pretty heavy wind, and watch that dog work it with enthusiasm. And that's what yes, it's your job to keep that enthusiasm in the dog. Can a trainer destroy that enthusiasm? Absolutely. It ain't hard to do. So we have to, bring the dog along, and to the point where we know they're ready for the next step. And I have something I do. It's just my own personal thing. I don't tell people they have to do it or anything. When I'm training a dog, I have a step, and I'm training a step. And I think I've got it pretty good. I think the dog understands it. I will perform that step 10 times in a row. It may be over a few days. It may be one day, depending on what the behavior is. If the dog performs it adequately 10 times in a row, I'm ready to move on. If they don't, well, I'm not ready to go. I stay at that step until I get it. So, I can't answer that question adequately without seeing the dog. If that person would send me a short video on email, then sure, I'll try to attempt to come up with something there. But without that, I don't know what is really going on. That's why I have the score sheet. I actually use the score sheet to diagnose and plan training for the next time. And it's come in really handy.
I think the score sheets and breaking things down, and not just train final response, but all parts of the process down into a metric-based system helps us produce better trained dogs. It helps us identify the issues we do need to work on.
Right, and it's always, I have a strange brain, and I know a lot of people said, yeah, you're strange all around, but, I have one side of my brain that's very creative, but I have another side of my brain which I think is pretty much like an engineer. I think about, how you break things down, how they go back together and all that sort of thing. And I'll just read them out here, and the things I look at on one run. This is just one short little session, a repetition in locating a cadaver source. I score the start. People never think about the start. If my dog doesn't go out with vigor and focus and purpose, well, how the heck can you expect the dog to do the rest of the stuff? I look at their basic search drive, and that's search drive to search hunt before they get the odor. When they smell the odor, what is their recognition? What's the value of that odor? Do they immediately snap their head and go straight to it? do they have odor discrimination, which means do they discriminate between a non-HR odor and another odor? Are they focused on the task during the search? Okay, now that can be both the dog genetics and it can be the training. We don't know. What is their locating drive? And the locating drive is when they smell the odor, how vigorously do they attempt to find it? Customs calls it bracketing. A lot of the detection people call it bracketing, looking for the odor. All right, what's their dedication or obedience to odor? When they find it, do they stay with it, or do they leave it? And then there's, of course, the train, final response. And I then score a couple other things like how far away from the source did they do their TFR, and of course that is based on whether it's high, low, winds, and all that sort of thing. And then I look at what's the value of the reinforcer, the reward. Is the reward important to them, or is it just something the handler wants the dog to like? And then another thing, which we probably don't think about enough, is do they restart to find another odor? Can we restart them? And then I also look at, in general, the independence of the dog. The dog that has the comfort level, the confidence to get out there and hunt. Now, I can train the distance from me that they're hunting, but I want to see their independence and how they're going about. So that's basically what I'm looking at on one repetition, if that makes any sense.
I've got a couple of quick questions that have also been submitted, and these are going to be our last two questions for the evening. Okay. The first one is, I'm training a sit and point with my young puppy. The hardest part is working on duration of the point. He tends to put nose on and then look at me. Any pointers for working on duration of the point?
Well, one of the things, and I think it ought to be tattooed on everybody's hand or somewhere where they can see it when they're training, and that's the word patience. And what I would say there is, one, I would hope, or you would benefit probably from some clicker training. And I can tell you, I gave a dog to a friend of mine, and it was a crazy Malinois, young one, she thought never was she going to get this dog to stay on duration because it bounced around like a rubber ball. The dog holds on duration, but it was because she was patient with only rewarding that which she desired. In other words, if the dog looks around, don't reward it. And of course, then the other thing that can happen is the dog gets confused or walks away. Well, you bring it back and run it again. You don't worry about it. You just take the dog in again and let it work it. I would work very close to the dog. I wouldn't work way back away from the dog. And personally, I can tell you 10 years ago, I was pretty anti-clicker, but I found it's an extremely powerful device in certain things in training. So work with the clicker, and all you do is extend like by half seconds or quarter seconds the duration. And you can run 30 repetitions on that in less than 5 minutes, and just rewarding the ones you like. And believe me, the dogs will figure it out. They will figure it out. And if you're having trouble, if he or she's having trouble with that, maybe get with someone who does some clicker training and kind of help them through that process. Again, if that makes any sense.
I would interject. To also check out what Robin Grubel is doing. She was last month's guest presenter. So unfortunately, my phone has just died. I've lost my connection with Bill. So any suggested reading materials. What I will do is get with Bill, and we will do a follow-up or a little addendum to this to include reading materials. Also, I know several people had asked about posting links to those videos. We will get those annotated and uploaded to everybody. The other thing, I'll take this last question and go ahead and ask it so everybody has it in their mind, and then we will get this added in with an addendum. So I've been told to do short odor drills, speed drills, to keep that desire up also. Curious as to the odor the other dogs missed, but you'd won't right, or you'd went right to. Is it a familiarity with the source? So that's the question. I'm going to see if we can't get Bill back on here, because what we were having to do is Bill had to call in on my phone because he was having connection issues at home, and I was having to broadcast his response through it. So while I'm taking a moment to do this, going back to the previous question about who to work with as far as duration of the point, I do have to recommend checking with Robin Grubel. Check out last month's Trainers Forum. Check out her videos that are on YouTube with the Canine Census Foundation. So
Sorry, I'm not sure what happened.
it was my phone. It died.
Oh no.
But we've got that corrected for. So hold on. I'll go ahead and read this last question. So I've been told to do short odor drills, speed drills, to keep that desire up. Curious as to the odor the other dogs missed, but his dog went right too. Is it just being familiar with the source?
Well, it may be. It depends. And again, and that's a whole separate, for me, a separate topic. One on odors. They're the ones you work on, their handling, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I know you and I have discussed a little bit about that odor thing. Yeah, it could be. We don't know. But listen, if you can teach a dog to find, and one of this friend in the Netherlands operates a sex crimes dog that locates human semen from rapes, and she puts 100 microliters as a sample, and that dog finds it. So I hesitate sometime on saying, yeah, if it's too little, I can't find it. So I don't know. I mean, again, this is where you need an on-site trainer that really is observant and, basically knows detection, and can help you through these things. That's why, one, I use the tube system to start dogs. I had a client that came, well, she only came once, and the first day the dog wouldn't even stick his head in the tube. By the second day, and I was working inside a cottage I have, the dog was literally, by the end of the day, was dragging her from her car into the cottage, putting its head into the tube and holding it there, and almost to have a hard time getting its head out of there because I was just feeding it hot dogs right and left. So it can be done. It depends on the dog, of course, and it depends on the training, how you present it to the dog. A lot of times it's all in presentation and how you work it. For me, in my opinion, is that detection work is probably one of the hardest, most sophisticated trainings of any kind we do with a dog. It's very sophisticated, and it's always helpful to have a good trainer that can work with you. If you don't, you end up making mistake after mistake after mistake, and you don't even realize you're making them. That was one of the things watching Dick Stahl. Things I thought were going wonderful. He was making comments to the handler how to handle that mistake dog just made. That I'm going, I saw it do that, but was that a mistake? He understands that even the tiniest little mistake can grow over time. And that's partly back to the metrics, metrics. How do we measure things, and things can deteriorate without us even realizing it. So it's like you could hold a gun to my head and tell me you don't pull the trigger if I can't solve this calculus problem, and I can just tell you, you might as well pull the trigger now because I ain't gonna do it because all that learning is deteriorated. I have no idea. And so those things happen, and it's very detection to me is very detail oriented, very detailed. Every repetition is important. Every single repetition. That's the best answer I can give for that. I don't know, but I would say that I'm pretty sure it's probably not the odor, the low odor. It's how those dogs were, I guess, using the common word, imprinted on that odor, and how enthusiastic they are about locating that odor.
I think you make a very good point, in how well were the dogs imprinted to specific odors, and and in doing so, one of the things I would like to interject is that we've got to make sure that we're putting a wide spectrum of odor concentrations in front of our dogs. The dog might not realize, I get paid for that level of odor.
Yeah, and again, it's that's why I start with the tubes. Now, I get rid of the tubes pretty darn fast. Well, I start with it because when they stick their head down in this 45-degree sewer pipe, all they got, every molecule of air pretty much they're breathing in has the odor in it. So while we're doing we're using operant conditioning to click and treat, they're also getting classical conditioning associating something pleasant with that odor. So, if you do it enough times, when they learn it, then you start moving it. You start changing. I'll take the bases off of the tubes off the bases and start just using the bases, because now they have the behaviors I need. Holding your nose on the odor, I take the tubes away, and now I take it out in the front yard, make it pretty easy when I strew the bases around, and then I slowly hide them behind a little bush or something, and they kind of come upon them and they sniff it. And usually the first time I do that is when they sniff the right odor, the hot odor. I give them their reward immediately. I don't ask for train final response don't even care. I want them to know that's what you're doing. And, pretty quick, I had to, I was asked to do a seminar down in Bogota, Colombia in 2.5 days to teach their search dogs to imprint them and have them searching on cadaver odor. And we got as far as they were hunting pretty darn good for the odor, hidden away from them. We just didn't have their train final response built in yet, but they were experienced enough; they knew how to do it. So it doesn't have to take a lot of time. This is a case of quality versus quantity. Sometimes you just have to set it up right, set them up for success, and let it go with that.
Very much so. What is on your suggested reading list for handlers?
You don't want to know my reading list because I read some of the. Yeah. Remember, I am a microbiologist. I was engaged in research for a number of years, et cetera, et cetera. So I tend to go to the more, what do you want to call it? I hate to call it scholarly, but the more scientific types of books and articles, on scent and that sort of thing. In my opinion, in my humble opinion, there is no decent book out there on training, even a detection dog. They all shoot around the edges and never really get to the heart of the thing. And personally, I don't know that. I remember back in my Schutzen days, a German judge would come over, and people would ask him, "Have you written a book? We'll pay for having it translated into English and publish it here." And without fail, the German judge would look at him like they're crazy and say, "It is impossible to write a book to train a dog." And if you look at it, it is. It's impossible. But, there's a number of books. Now, unfortunately, many of the ones, particularly the CRC books, are priced outrageous. But I can recommend that if you go on Google Scholar and type in any search string you're looking for, detection dogs, just think up all the words, just go through all of it, and you'll find a fair number of published papers on detection. I probably have 1,500 downloaded. I'm not sure why. I don't have the time to read them, but I get the gist of them, and if it's really important, I'll read the thing. But there's so many details to this. I would say read anything you can find by Nathan Hall out of Texas Tech, the folks at Auburn, or else. You can help me out here, Paul. I'm drawing a blank on some of them that work in scent. Paul, I'm reading one now by I can't even pronounce her name, but it's an Italian name. Paula, anyhow.
Paola Priata.
Yeah. So I'm reading that, and there's lots of information there. Some of it maybe not super practical, but you may get some insights on that. But right now, there's not much. I think for detection people, they need to get their hands dirty with a good trainer and work their butt off.
I think that's so true because, yes, there's science behind this, but also there's very much an art behind this. And
Yep.
To truly understand both, the only way you can really master it is to get out there and just do it.
Yep.
Put in the hours working with the trainers. Put in the hours making those mistakes yourself. One of the other authors you can search for, he gets included on a lot of the studies, is Ken Furton.
He's a second author on probably every article in the world down there.
Because that's what his lab was set
Yeah.
up to do there at Florida International, and he's got a lot of students that have come through his doors over the years and have really helped saturate a lot of this research, and a lot of times some of this stuff it's going to be listed under narcotics dogs. So don't look exclusively for
Absolutely.
cadaver dog work. You're going to find a lot of information out there under explosive detection dogs, narcotics, and so forth.
Conservation dogs. There's a lot of good information, believe it or not, on conservation dogs.
Yes.
Those people have done a hell of a pile of work.
So and there's some really good books out there. You just, it's whether or not you've got the bank account to get them all, because they are being published by CRC. In our little break, one of the things I told them is that you and I try to work to get some of these videos annotated or so forth, and do like a little addendum at some point so that they can see some of these examples that you were talking about.
I would love to see my deal, and this is a promise I made literally almost 42 years ago to one of my mentors in Switzerland, was I promise to always share, and we need to share. This is not about any single person. This is about getting people to be the best that we need, what we need to have. And, I want to give you a little quick anecdote about what we're talking about, scientists and practitioners. And I'm kind of weird, because I'm like Paul, I'm stuck in the middle somewhere, because we're both scientists and practitioners. But I was standing there. Now you got to understand, for a guy like me, this was like the closest, if there was a heaven, that I was in it. I'm standing there looking through a one-way mirror at Dick Stahl starting a detection dog, standing next to Dr. Addie Schoon, and having a conversation with Addie Schoon. Now, Dick Stahl is working this dog, and obviously it's working, and she's sitting there telling me he can't do what he's doing. And of course, I'm not commenting on that. I'm not going to get in that buzzsaw, because I've worked with Addie before. I've been to one of her seminars, and she don't give up very easy. So I'm not about to get in an argument with her. And so I'm going there, well, can't you see that what he's doing is working? So science is good, but many of these scientists have never even, I don't wonder some days whether they've even touched a dog. But they've got good information that you can utilize. But you got to make it practical. You got to see where it works. As I said, I'm consulting with a team down in Argentina right now, and I'm afraid their dogs have gotten into contextual habits, meaning the odor is only worth anything to them if it's found in a certain context, and for them it's the search of the scent boxes. If you train a dog on scent boxes exclusively, that doesn't mean they know odor out in the wild, in the deployment environment. They have to be put out in a deployment environment and learn how to work in a deployment environment. I can tell you straight up, I made that mistake a long time ago, and never make it again. So you got to also worry about context when the dogs work. So, there you go. This is pretty complicated stuff. That's why I love it so much. But
very much so. I just want, in closing, I just want to say thank you for joining us tonight in the Trainers Forum. And next month, we will have Craig Schultz joining us.
cool.
So Yeah.
Well, it's been my pleasure, and I hope I didn't bore anybody, and hopefully there's some good information that you can use. And as I said, I may regret this, but that's just me. I'm retired. I don't, and I'm sitting here in whatever they call it, quarantine or isolation, or is send me an email. I'll send you. Ask me questions. Hell, doesn't matter. But if you want the score sheet thing, I can send that out to you and answer questions on it and that sort of thing. I do a lot of, I don't want to call it consulting because I don't charge for it, consulting out around the country and South America, particularly with teams on detection. So I'm used to this sort of thing.
Oh, I just want to say thank you again. And to our audience, thank you for joining us tonight. If you do have any questions, make sure to email Bill, or you can email me, and I will make sure that Bill gets it and you get a response back.
Yeah.
And check out hrdspecializedcanine.com for, any additional webinars, remote coaching classes, and so forth. And stay safe, everybody. Stay at home if you don't have to be out. That's so critical right now. And look forward to talking to everybody and hopefully working with your dogs here in this upcoming year once the quarantines get lifted.
Well, that's something you can do right now yourself. You can work with your dog. Even if I advise a good friend that she's kind of isolated and she's immunocompromised somewhat, just to teach your dog tricks. Don't worry about what you're teaching. Teach the dog to do something. Just a trick. Keep the dogs fresh. Keep them moving.
Well, with that, we're going to sign off. Thank you, everyone.
Auf Wiedersehen. Danke.